Kriya Yoga is much more than just the specific technique. It's a whole way of life. It's a whole approach to an attitude toward life. It embraces all the various paths of religion and brings them all into a comprehensive whole. The basis of all yoga teaching is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and he gives the Eightfold Path there as the fundamental path that all devotees, whatever their religion, embrace. The first, the yamas and niyamas, are the do's and don'ts, the 10 commandments of yoga, which are comparable, though not identical to the 10 commandments of Moses, in which the devotee is taught to give up his attachment to the world, to withdraw from attachment, to withdraw from desire, not to let his energy go outward, but to bring it within himself. And this is what we should do when we meditate too, that we should mentally cast out of our mind worldly preoccupations, plans, as Master put it, important as well as unimportant. Don't entertain plans while you meditate. Let your meditation, just as when you go to sleep at night, you don't think, oh, but I've got these problems to worry about and I've got these things to solve. At night you go to sleep and you forget it. In the morning you figure you'll be able to take it up again. The same thing with your meditation. When you sit to meditate, feel that this is my time for God. The world doesn't exist. And the world will be waiting for you when you get back to it. You don't have to worry about leaving it that quickly. So these are the restraints, those things which bring our minds within, and then the things that we should do in order to offer ourselves completely with a pure heart to God. These are things that I've gone into at length in my lessons on yoga, which I won't describe now. Then we come to the step of asana. Asana means only posture. It means to be able to sit still, completely still, with a straight spine, relaxed body. That's all it means. And around that word, they've developed the whole science of Hatha Yoga to help you to achieve asana. But really, and this is why Hatha Yoga, although described as a separate yoga, is really the physical branch of the path of Raja Yoga. Then, when the body is completely still, you begin to become aware of the energies in the body. And these energies need to be withdrawn gradually from the body, from the senses, and directed upward toward the brain. And then when your energy is flowing inward, then you have to bring your mind inward too. Pranayama is the control of the energy. And then the pratyahara is the state of inwardly withdrawing the thoughts and focusing them all. Now it's only really when you've been able to do that and then concentrate your mind one-pointedly in dharana, then you're able to concentrate, then you're able to start meditation properly. Everything else is actually practice toward meditation. But real meditation begins when the mind is completely still, when the energy is completely withdrawn, when it's completely focused. And then you have the experience of the divine, particularly in the form of Om, whether as light or as sound. And in meditating on that sound, let us say, of Om, and being merged in that blissful sound that pervades the entire universe, gradually you begin to lose the sense of being separate from the divine. You begin to see this light in your body. As Jesus said, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be filled with light. When you see the single eye and merge in that eye, then your whole body is filled with light. And then, as you begin to see that this light, this sound is in your body, you begin to see the light and sound outside the body. You begin to realize that there really isn't any difference, that you are that infinite. And you go into samadhi. And samadhi has 2 basic stages, that in which you drown yourself, and that in which, having found yourself there, you discover that your body and all things are a part of that infinite consciousness. And so we see that this is, it can be called a path. Of course, in a way, it's a path, and in a way it's not a path, because you're not going anywhere. Really what you're doing is just getting rid of all these things that you aren't. We go to school to learn. We take up yoga to unlearn. We take up yoga to get away from the thought that I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm intellectual, I'm artistic, I'm a businessman, I'm this thing and that thing, I have a habit of anger, I have a habit of kindness. All these different qualities we gradually get rid of and realize that we aren't anything at all. We are that infinite sound, which first we hear in the body and then gradually expand and realize in infinite space. Now, how to achieve this state? Again, we see this marvelous oneness. In the beginning, the very first sutra, Patanjali, is one that is almost amusing in a way, because it seems amusing, I should say. It really isn't. But it seems so because you think of aphorisms as saying something deep. And this first aphorism, all it says is, now we come to the practice of yoga, to the study of yoga. Doesn't sound like much of an aphorism until you understand what that now means. It implies that there has been already a study beforehand. You come to yoga after having understood certain basic things. And so we see united here the three fundamental philosophies, Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta. Sankhya is basically that teaching which tells you why you need to get away from the limitations of Maya, of ego, of body. Then when you understand that, when your attitude is right, and this is one of the wonderful things that Master helped to bring to the West. You see, teaching yoga in India, they understand that part already. They understand that this world is a dream. They understand that there are certain basic attitudes necessary, devotion, self-offering, and so on. And so they're much more ready in that sense for yoga than Americans. Americans, however, have something else that's really, they have going for them, that's really important. And that is that they're very practical people. They don't want to talk about philosophy, they want to experience it. That's why, Master said, that's why Babaji sent this technique to the West. He said, because Westerners wanted a technique. They had techniques in science, they had techniques in the political field, in business, in everything else. But they wanted to know how to find peace also. And so God sent through Babaji, through Master, through Lahiri Mahashaya and Sri Yukteswar and this whole line of gurus, this great science to the West, in order to help satisfy that great need. And another wonderful thing about the consciousness in America that Master liked was the attitude, eventually, why not now? Instead of thinking that we can find it perhaps after 1,000,000 lifetimes, why not go for it now? It's this attitude that helps people to make much greater progress on the spiritual path. This is why Swami Ramatirtha, when he lectured here at the turn of the century, said, someday you Americans will take up this science of yoga and bring it down to human consciousness, make it real, make it practical, and then bring it back to my people. And in fact, we see each has something important to give to the other in this respect. But Sankhya, you see, in America, for example, many people think, well, Kriya Yoga, if it's a technique, why can't they just put it in a book and I can read it? I can go down to the library and not even have to buy a copy. And in India, they understand very well that if you don't take it in the form of initiation, if you don't treat it as something holy, if you don't take it inside just as a technique, you're not doing anything that will really help you. It'll give you something, but altogether too little compared to what it promises. We could say in this way, to use an illustration that I've used before, that the spine is like a magnet. And when you have a magnet, or when you have a bar of steel that isn't magnetized, you have all the molecules, each one with its own north-south polarity, but they're all turned in a random manner in such a way as to cancel each other out, and that's why an ordinary bar of steel has no magnetism. But if you can turn all those molecules in a north-south direction so that all their flow is in one direction, then you have a magnet. And there are two ways you can create a magnet. One is to put the bar of steel next to another magnet. And that is the power of the Guru. The influence of the Guru. I've often also used this illustration that when I studied singing as a boy in college, my singing teacher was a woman. But when I learned to sing from her, she taught me to sing by imitating her voice. That is to say, her placement, not her timbre. But she would sing a tone, and I would try to get it. No, she'd say, no, not that, again. After 6 months, she finally stopped me in the middle of a song and said, that note, that's the way all your notes should sound. One note after 6 months. But she was so sensitive and so careful about teaching me how to place my voice. But what she gave me was my voice, not her voice. And so many people have this imagination, this delusion, that by following a guru, then you just become a carbon copy of the guru. You lose your own personality, you lose who you are. The guru, a marvelous example, was Sri Yukteswar and Master. Because Sri Yukteswar was he loved the deep intricacies of the spiritual teaching. He talked in terms, as Master said, of cold spiritual mathematics. And Master was a bhakta, Master was a devotee. He didn't really have too much patience for that. He took it as a disciple and he went into it. And of course, being a great yogi, he understood it very well. But his nature, the nature he was born with, was diametrically opposed to that of Sri Yukteswar. And yet, by attuning himself to Sri Yukteswar, it didn't mean that he became Jnana Yogi. He became more deep in his own devotional approach, because what Sri Yukteswar gave was that spiritual magnetism that unfolded him in himself. Another difference was between Lahiri Mahashaya and Sri Yukteswarji. Because Lahiri Mahashaya was very loving to everybody, very kind, very supportive of people. Nobody ever fled from him, as Sri Yukteswar said ruefully, because from Sri Yukteswar everybody fled. Almost everybody. He converted Master. But he was a very stern disciplinarian. I said to Master one time, was it because he knew that he wasn't coming back to this plane of existence? He didn't want to take on more disciples? And Master said, that's right. He had a few stragglers this time, that's all. But, for example, right in front of 3,000 people, Master got up and his foot turned over a part of a carpet. And Sri Yukteswar, with withering scorn, said, look at that clumsy. Why did he do this? Because he wanted to make Master, adjust Master to his mission in the West, where he'd have to put up with a lot worse than that. And to make Master not make it such a shock when he came here, to find such a different state of consciousness. But Master said, everybody laughed, and I looked at them and I thought, none of them has what I have. But he was calm about it. It didn't matter. The thing is, however, that their natures, in a human way, were so different. And yet, each gave to the other that which was in himself. You don't become somebody else. You can never be anybody else but yourself. What the yoga teachings help you to do, what the masters help us to do, is discover ourself not as our personality, but that deep, deep individuality with which every atom in the universe is endowed. Each one of us has that, but it has nothing to do with personality. Now then, the magnet of the Guru, by attunement with that magnet, you also develop that magnetism. And another thing develops that magnetism, your own upward flow of energy. You can accomplish this through devotion, You can accomplish this through action. You can accomplish this through discrimination. But much more directly, Kriya Yoga, acting upon the spine, brings that energy upward and helps to magnetize you gradually until the point where arrives where all your flow of energy is upward. And that's why Master said that the spiritual path is 25% your effort, 25% the grace of the Guru, and 50% the grace of God. Because when you finally reach that point, then God's light floods you, and that's the thing that completely transforms you. But the paths of yoga, again, they're all basically one. I was coming back to Sankhya and Yoga and Vedanta. Let me finish that thought first. That once you understand the path, once you understand where you have to go, then comes the practice of yoga. But the practice of yoga, without knowing what you're doing or why you're doing yoga, you can also wander a long time before you discover. And so the Vedanta philosophy helps us. It's not a philosophy, it's a revealed truth. Philosophy means philos means love, Sophia means wisdom. It means love of wisdom. Vedanta is wisdom because it's the revealed experience of great masters. But what they've discovered is certain things which, if you keep in mind, then you will find it much easier to practice your yoga because you'll be going in that direction rather than using yoga for powers, using yoga to gain success in this world and so on, which so many people do. I even saw an advertisement in a magazine the other day, mud baths and yoga. No, mud baths, massage, and yoga. It's all doing yoga to become thin, doing yoga to lose your stomach problems. So many people think that yoga is something this superficial. And so the Vedanta philosophy helps us to understand what it is, that our goal isn't only even to love God, but to become that, to realize that in ourselves that that is what we are. We are, each one of us, the very center of the universe. That's what Master described when he talked about his first experience of cosmic consciousness. He said, I understood this, I cognized the center of this cosmic empyrean as a point of intuitive perception in my own heart. Each one of us, it's this universe's center everywhere, circumference nowhere. And so these three philosophies are really one, and not at odds with one another, the way so many pundits and scholars have tried to make out. And the same thing with the different paths of yoga. Because although the emphasis is on your particular temperament, so that if your temperament is more emotional, then naturally you will go more easily toward devotion. If you're more intellectual, you'll go more toward jnana yoga. If you're more toward action, you'll go toward karma yoga. But as you perfect each of those, you come to the point, for example, the devotee, if he's really deeply sincere in his devotion, he reaches the point where he no longer can sing outwardly. Teresa of Avila was a great saint in the Christian world who made this discovery. She went by devotion, but she said that she reached that point where she couldn't pray anymore. Her mind was completely held still. She called this the fourth stage of prayer. And in that continuation of her sadhana, she reached the point where she discovered an experience of Jesus that was without form. And at that point, her superiors in the church thought that she was becoming heretical, until one of them discovered in an ancient writing by a great saint that in fact the formless Christ is the highest experience of Christ, not Christ in a vision with form, but the infinite consciousness. And so they accepted what she said. But she was talking from her own experience. She said that the soul is seated in the top of the head. She discovered this by her experience. There wasn't anything in her tradition that told her this. And so the path of bhakti yoga, if followed deeply, brings you to that point where there's just this as Master called it, I can pray no more with words, but only with wistful yearning of my soul. And then, in the path of Jnana Yoga, rightly understood, has absolutely nothing to do with intellectuality. Too many people think of Jnana Yoga as analyzing the scriptures. As Shibendhu was saying, analysis is paralysis. It's you won't get there by reason. And in fact, I've found that simple people have much more opportunity, much more ability, natural ability for spiritual development than people who think themselves very educated and intelligent. In fact, here's an interesting thought. When we think of, let's say, another planet, highly evolved beings, highly evolved civilizations, and so on, always what you hear is people saying that they are much more intelligent than we are. But you know, when we think of angels, do we think of them in the context of being intelligent? We never do. It's as if we all somehow understood that there's another level of understanding that is far deeper than being intelligent. Perceiving. Intelligence means chopping it all up and then trying to put it back together again. Perceiving, you don't have to do that. You see it right away, as it is. And so, Jnana Yoga, really the purpose of Jnana Yoga is to demolish the ego. To watch the ego, neti neti, this isn't so, that isn't so, not this, not that. Watch yourself in all things and see how the ego plays and stand back from it. Well, mind you, everybody has to do that. Whether there's a bhakti yogi or a jnana yogi or karma yogi, everybody has to do that. And if you practice jnana yoga without devotion, you won't get there. Sri Yukteswar, who was a jnana yogi par excellence, in his book, which almost nobody understands, at the end of it he says, I hope I have shown that God is love. And also he makes the statement in this book, and this is something Shibendhu was saying yesterday in answer to the question of Robin about how do you love your children, for example. Sri Yukteswar said that he speaks of the heart's natural love. He doesn't speak of developing love, he speaks of getting rid of the meannesses of the heart that prevent you from experiencing love. Family pride, pride of pedigree as he put it, pride of knowledge, pride of position, pride of wealth, all these things that make the heart narrow. He says you have to get rid of that. You have to get rid of the thought that you are anything, that you own anything. Don't live in the thought of referring everything back to yourself. Once you can make your heart soft, that love is there all the time. I mean, we were made from love. How do you develop it? This is why it's so interesting in the Yoga Sutras, also in the Ashtanga Yoga, the Eightfold Path of Patanjali. He speaks, for example, of truthfulness, not as truthfulness, but as non-lying. The idea being that if you get rid of the wish to lie, you're automatically going to be truthful. This is your nature. You don't have to try to be truthful. You have to give up the wish not to be. And the same thing with all these different qualities. And so the Jnana Yogi, Sri Yukteswar, also had great devotion, but it was all internal. It wasn't something he expressed outwardly very often, but he had great love in his soul, in his heart. And the same thing with Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga must be understood in different ways. Lahiri Mahashaya taught us the highest kind of Karma Yoga, because the highest kind of Karma Yoga is offering your own energy up to God in meditation. That's why he gave this great technique the very simple name, Kriya Yoga. Kriya means simply action. And it's a kind of inner Karma Yoga. But we'll get back to that in a moment. The point that I wanted to say here first was that even in Karma Yoga, the essence of which is not, I know many people will have said to me in India, in this country, everywhere, that, I'm not ready to take up meditation yet. My path for now is Karma Yoga. Well, it may or it may not be, but the way many of these people mean it is that my path for now is to become rich. This is not Karma Yoga. This is Karma Bhoga. Seeking the pleasure of your karmas, not the result of karma yoga. Karma yoga means to give up the fruits of action, not to be attached to what you're doing, to the point where you come to realize that you're not even doing it. Because as long as you think, I am acting, you're still not acting properly. Whereas as you give up the fruits of action and cease to be involved in them, cease to be attached to them, you begin to realize that there's something flowing through you, taking over. And that when that happens, he's the one doing it. And then, well, in the beginning, you have to keep doing. I remember back many years ago when I was early lecturing, and Master told me that I must pray beforehand and let God talk through me, and I always did that. But one day in the middle of a lecture, I thought, well, if I must let God talk through me, maybe I should just completely shut up and let him start talking. It was an experiment. I didn't really believe that would happen that way necessarily, but I wanted to know. And so in the middle of my talk, I stopped and waited and waited and waited. 2 minutes, people were perspiring, thinking I'd frozen with fear, but I was very comfortably and calmly waiting for God to talk and praying to him all the time inside. Come on, say something. He didn't say a word. And then I came to understand that I had to do it, but keep in tune with him and let his inspiration come. And in fact, that's how it's happened, that when you do it in that way, you're not really thinking, I'm doing it. You're thinking, he's doing it. And the more you have that thought, the more you come to a level where things happen even if you don't do anything. Because that does come in the end. A great yogi who never speaks is nevertheless doing more for humanity than people who are going out like missionaries trying to save everybody. Saving them all, sending them all to heaven. They may be sent, but they never arrive. And so the karma yogi begins to reach that point too. As the jnana yogi, the bhakti yogi, I didn't say this for the jnana yogi, but let me say it, that he reaches that point where who is to discriminate? The mind becomes still because he realizes that it's not in thinking that you achieve it. And so it goes into that inner silence. And the karma yogi also reaches that point where if his motives are pure, he finally sees that God is the doer, and then he begins to feel God. And he goes into that silence. And he realizes the greatest karma yoga of all is simply to offer yourself to God. This world is God's responsibility. We need to purify ourselves by helping and serving. And in fact, when, for example, I teach you, some of you say, I help you. The truth is, you help me. Because you give me an opportunity to serve in such a way that I can come closer to God in the way my Guru told me to do it. But you see, in that, we come to realize that the only really important thing isn't the work that we do, isn't the people we help, isn't the things the books we write and all that. Those things are basically completely without meaning. Just sort of shuffling the deck, one sequence of cards or another. Ultimately, the only thing that is important is our love for God. And whether at the end of this incarnation we will have pleased him. We were born only for that, not to do anything. And the karma yogi, as he discovers this, becomes more and more quiet, and actions begin to fall away, and he becomes still. And so you see, all these different yogas are really one, and nor can you separate them, because not one of them is complete without the others. The bhakti yogi without discrimination will just be emotional. The bhakti yogi without servicefulness will become selfish. The jnana yogi without devotion won't get anywhere. It'll be armchair philosophy. The jnana yogi without action will be impractical, and he won't use his energy in the right way. The karma yogi without discrimination, without devotion, he just becomes involved in restlessness. All of these things are a part of one basic teaching, yoga. And Raja Yoga therefore takes all of these different attitudes into the picture, makes them all one, and then practices this highest of karmas, this highest of devotion, this highest discrimination or jnana, this self-offering into the infinite. And then you go beyond that yoga into yoga, which is union.